Unit glue. Any update on Greenland? I was doing a little bit of reading on Greenland. Yeah, I mean, basically the United States through NATO, and there's not a lot that Denmark can do. And Denmark just suffered that humiliating defeat. What is her name? Mette Frederiksen, the prime minister, who held early elections because she thought she could capitalize on pushing back on Trump and the unpopularity that Trump had among the Danes. She thought she could capitalize on that. She ended up losing. She ended up losing in a humiliating landslide defeat. Because the Social Democrats had their own problems, but nevertheless, the basic deal gives the United States sort of like embassy sovereignty. So we don't have to own Greenland, but NATO gives us the permission to use any part of Greenland we want. So Denmark can continue to send their welfare checks to the 50,000 people who live in who make up the nation of Greenland. They could still have their pampered welfare world. And then we just dig, baby, dig, and we just mine the place and build our missile silos and anti-aircraft missile technologies so as to take out Russia's hypersonic missiles that would be traveling in that area. And we'll be building up more of our ports so as to have to be part of this new strait that's opening up, trade route strait that's opening up as the Earth warms up. The Earth is warming. There is a global warming. What it has to do with, our industrialism's anyone's guess. Earth, we want the Earth warm. Human populations always gather where it's warm. We're the first generation, the Greta generation, to want the Earth cooler. Nobody wants that. So anyway, with that up in the north, we're going to have trade routes open up. We're going to have minerals, and we're going to have military. Money, minerals, and military. Franz, Dr. Steve is a fellow multipolarian. I guess I'm still looking to understand how reserve currency works in the multipolar dynamic. Well, I guess it depends how you define multipolarity. So for me, you could start at the military level. So in a multipolar world, by definition, nuclear powers are poles. They're pole power. If you're not a nuclear power, you're not a pole. I mean, just ask Iran. Just ask Venezuela. If you're not a nuclear power, you're not a pole. If you're a nuclear power, you are a major military power. Okay, so and there's multiple nations like that. Now, when it comes to economics, you can demonstrate polarity in number of ways. For example, 80% of the world has as their primary trade partner China. That's polarity. That's huge. China is the number one trade partner and the number one exporter for 80% of countries on this planet. That is gigantic. And that's, of course, all part of their BRI, their Belt and Road initiative. Russia is a major pole power with their energy and their ability to trade resource and commodity. So when it comes to things like trade, when it comes to things like commodity, you can be a major power, and you can have things that the rest of the world really needs, without which we all become very, very impoverished. That's a pole. But when you're getting into cash, when you're getting into currency, we dominate. There's no way we dominate cash and currency the way China dominates the export market. No other country comes close. The yuan does not come close because the yuan can't get converted. It doesn't matter if you're doing oil transactions in the yuan or any kind of trade transaction in the yuan. What are you going to do with the yuan? If China's paying you in yuan, what are you going to do with it? you're going to probably convert it into dollars. That's what you're probably going to do. So the dollar maintains total supremacy when it comes to cash, when it comes to the finance side of things. When it comes to fuel, when it comes to commodity, when it comes to exports, there are other major players on the field. Now, BRICS nations wanted to decouple themselves from the dollar completely, largely because of the way Biden weaponized the dollar. And they got very nervous with that. And a lot of countries got very nervous, as they should. I thought it was a big mistake to have done that. But nevertheless, what every multipolar theorist that I've read has, except some of the more really, really optimistic ones, every single one of them said decoupling from the dollar is really hard. The dollar just found its way into, because of its convertibility, it found its way into basically everything. And so to find another currency that would have that kind of convertibility, we just don't see it. We don't know that. Again, that's where they were getting into, well, what about Bitcoin? Because then if you're dealing with digital currency, well, now that can get converted, but in, Ethereum and Solana. And so now you've basically wrenched away from the old industrial order into the new noosphere, as we call it in our technopolar sense, the sphere of digitality and cyber civilization. So that's but in terms of just a hard currency, very difficult to replace the dollar. But that's not the only pole. That's all. That's what I would say. Again, and remember, multipolarity too is it is dynamic in terms of the seed of power, or the seat of power, I should probably say. It's dynamic. During the Biden years, America was clearly denigrating and dying on the world stage in terms of power. China, Russia, India, they were rising. Saudi Arabia, they were rising. The Emiratis, they were all rising powers. The United States was dying. Japan was dying. Now it's flipped. Now the United States is rising. Japan is rising. Saudi Arabia continues to rise. India continues to rise. But now China and Russia are getting boxed out. So, and again, we can get, God forbid, Gavin Newsom coming in 2028, and it's going to flip. The dollar's going to start going down, and the basic power projection of the United States is going to start going down, and Russia and China are going to rise again. So it's very dynamic. It's very seesawy. But right now, you can't take on Trump right now. The astro-political, technopolitical, theopolitical vision he has, and the civcosm, the civilization cosmocracy, can't be. We just have all the resources for it right now, whereas China and Russia are playing major catch-up. Sean Keeney, Dr. Steve, is Tucker Carlson becoming an apostate, shooting bullets at Christians, calling them Zionists and killers, while extending an olive branch to Muslims, claiming they love Jesus too, and you should not mock their faith? Oh, that's a good question. Is he becoming an apostate? I won't go there. I think some are. That's a very good question, Sean. Because again, it just doesn't seem to understand the world that's rising. Why is Iran suddenly the spokesperson and the symbol for Islam? When did that happen? They represent 15% of Islam. Shiaism is 15% of Islam. 85% of Islam is Sunni. So why not Saudi Arabia? Saudi Arabia certainly sees itself as the de facto leader of global Islam, being the home of Mecca and Medina. Why the Shiite theocracy? Why not the Sunni theocracy in Saudi Arabia? It doesn't make any sense, other than because Saudi Arabia is more or less teaming up with Israel now. They haven't joined the Abraham Accords, but they are very, very inclined to. I think that's part of Mohammed bin Salman was very excited when Trump announced, when he was in Riyadh, that they were recognizing the new government in Syria. Remember, Syria used to be with what is it, Abbas, and he was more pro-Iranian because Iran helped to keep him in power. And now with this new former ISIS officer, ISIS was a Sunni supremacist organization, or still is. Assad, sorry, I knew I had the name wrong in Syria, but so now that al-Assad is gone, now the Sunni alignment between Saudi Arabia and Syria is in full effect. And when Trump came in and said, we are going to officially recognize Syria, with even an official visit to the Oval Office, that basically was the green light from Mohammed bin Salman to say, okay, we'll join the Abraham Accords. We'll be under this U.S. brokered security arrangement so that we can bring together Israeli muscle with Arab money, and we are going to economically thrive in this area. We are going to turn this desert into an oasis. This is so much more than turning Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East. That's a symbol of what Trump has envisioned and in fairness, Mohammed bin Salman as well, for the entire region. And the chief impediment to that was Iran. So I personally I have no problem people saying that Muslims honor Jesus, because they do. I have no problem with people saying Jesus is a major prophet in Islam, which he is, that Jesus is going to return again, which they do believe. I have no problem with that. But why on earth are you aligning those beliefs solely with a Shiite regime that chanted death to America, and not to Saudi Arabia, not to the UAE, not to Syria, not to Egypt, not to Turkey? Why? Why are you doing that? Not to Jordan. I mean, we could just keep going and going, right? And Bahrain and so forth. Why are you doing that? So that to me is the giveaway, that he's depicting a world that doesn't exist. The Shiites represent a small minority of global Islam that is radically hostile right now to the supermajority of Islamic nations, and all the GCC nations as well. I mean, it's very, very hostile to it. So why go with that? You can have Islam and you can have Israel. They're not at odds anymore right now, not under the Abraham Accords architecture. They're not at odds. That world doesn't exist. The theopolitics has changed. And I don't know why he's gone there. I don't. I have no inside information.